This webinar series is a four-part series, as I mentioned, and it will cover topics such as recruitment and selection, which we will do tonight, performance management, employee retention, and employee departure. I have some experience in the banking industry in Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as the oil and gas industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I feel this experience that I have under my belt has really prepared me and made me look forward to the next 18 months. I find it hard to believe that 4 months has already passed, and I will introduce you shortly to my colleague, Darlene Scott, who will go through some of the objectives of the Creative HR project. I've always had a love for the people side of things. My background is a Master of Employment Relations at Memorial University of Newfoundland, and I have also done a Bachelor of Commerce co-op degree with a focus in human resources. I just wanted to let you know that we do have a social media presence online. We are active on Twitter, so if you enjoy tonight's presentation, please feel free to say some positive comments about us on social media. We can also be found on Facebook. You can search Community Sector Council Newfoundland and Labrador, and we will pop up. And our little @ symbol CSCNL will also pop up there. To start, I just want to say that what we will go through today will be informative and not advisory in nature. What I mean by this is the information contained in these slides was compiled by researching the nonprofit sector, and it's to help you, deal with complex problems relating to human resources and suit your own organizational needs. So we will be providing tips, some resources, things that you can use every day in your organizations. What will we cover today? What will you learn about in this presentation? You will learn the basics of attracting and marketing applicants, including job descriptions, employee orientation, and non-standard employment in nonprofit organizations. We will touch on selection methods, including planning the selection process, conducting interviews, reference checks, employment offers, and the importance of paperwork. We will also touch on HR policies and employment legislation. I'll be providing some sample HR policies, where to find them. We will touch on employment standards and why this is important, as well as human rights legislation, and briefly we'll talk about health and safety legislation. We will also talk about workplace orientation, an employee's introduction to the workplace. We will briefly touch on how it's important to share organizational information and build workplace relationships. So just to tell you a bit about Creative HR, before I get Darlene on the line, I just wanted to show you this nice image of the 4 pillars that we have created for the Creative HR project. We've classed all HR topics under 4 main areas, which include staff recruitment and selection, employee performance management, employee retention, and employee departure. We thought this model fit quite well, and we're very excited to be telling you all about it. So right now I'm going to unmute Darlene Scott, my colleague here at the Community Sector Council, and she's going to let you know a bit more about Creative HR.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks to everybody for being with us this evening. As Tina mentioned, my name is Darlene Scott. I'm a program associate here at the Community Sector Council. I've been here for a few years doing research and also some training. Lots of webinars on the go, so we hope you're checking out our events calendar at the Community Sector Council website. The Creative HR project that made it possible for us to put Tina in place as an HR specialist is an 18-month pilot project. We are going to be having a series of regional meetings. We're in St. John's, Tina and I. We're going to have a series of regional meetings in other parts of the province, though, so stay tuned for information about that. Because what we're trying to do in Creative HR is several things. One of the things that is a deliverable for our project is an assessment of labor market needs in the nonprofit community-based sector. We know some things about the sector, predominantly women, lots of seasonal and short-term and temporary employment, and lots of issues, everything from benefits to long-term funding stability. But there's no really good piece of research on the actual labor market for the nonprofit sector in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we're going to take a stab at that over the next 12 to 18 months. We're very interested in networking employers in Newfoundland and Labrador in the nonprofit sector who want to keep a focus on HR. If, for example, our pilot project only results in research findings, we'd be very sad. We really want to have a connected network of people who want to continue to focus on HR issues, because small groups in particular can't afford to have their own HR specialist, which is why Tina's been put in place, and the network would support ongoing work. We're also interested in putting many more resources online. Tina's going to refer to some online resources, but they aren't very specific to the nonprofit sector. So we're going to improve the amount of online resources that are collected for nonprofit groups in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's a little bit of a general overview. Watch for us. Try to sign up for our newsletter. You know us at the Community Sector Council. We're always trying to stay in touch with you. So you feel free to stay in touch with us. You can call Tina toll free at 1-866 753 9860. So I'm going to let Tina get on with tonight's presentation. And once again, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Darlene. That was a great overview of Creative HR and what we're doing here at the Community Sector Council. Before we continue on, I just wanted to let you know that I am recording this session, so it will be available on our website at a date in the near future once we get it downloaded. I just wanted to let you know also that there is a chat box down at the bottom of the right-hand side of your screen. So Darlene kindly is helping me in monitoring that chat box. What we will do is we will hold all questions until the end of the presentation, and we will open the opportunity to go through those questions. So at any time, if you think of something, feel free to write it, and we will address it at the end of the presentation. I also want to let you know that there is a handout located in this session under handouts. There's just one, so it includes some great resources on staff recruitment and selection in the nonprofit sector. Don't worry if you don't download it here tonight. I will be glad to send it to all attendees after and make it available online. So I hope you can hear me well. If there are any major problems with the way the sound is going, please feel free to alert, and Darlene will be watching the chat box and she will let me know. So without further ado, we will get started. You all registered for this session tonight because you wanted to learn more about staff recruitment in the nonprofit sector. And you possibly know more than I do about it. And that's why it's so great to create that network of people to be able to share resources. Quite often you will find that recruitment and selection in the nonprofit sector has its unique set of challenges. Employees are highly invested in their jobs and they care strongly about the work that they do. Unfortunately, turnover tends to be high in the nonprofit sector due to the competitive environment. I have had some different experiences in the past, as I said, with different industries, and this is the first time that I've worked for a nonprofit organization, so I can really see why employees are so invested in their jobs. I really love my job so far. I'm glad to be here, and I can see what challenges may arise when it comes to compensation, resources, things like that. But not to discount it, because I think it's a great place to work, and there are other things that we can do in nonprofit organizations to attract and retain talent, which we will go through in this presentation. When people are very interested in their job and they invest themselves fully in their job and continue to be creative in their job, unfortunately burnout can inevitably result. Quite often the person in the organization tasked with human resources functions wears many other hats, and they have many other duties. I don't expect you to answer this question while you are all muted, But I just want you to think about this question. Have you ever been in a situation where a role needed to be filled quickly and you felt you were scrambling? So if you have some thoughts on that, please feel free to write it in the chat box and we can go through it at the end of the presentation. Quite often, when time is an issue, nonprofit employers may scramble to find a replacement quickly, and they tend not to hire with a proper recruitment process. It's pretty difficult as well when budgeting constraints play a role, as they dictate the salaries that can be offered, the compensation, and the benefits packages that can be offered. So, the information contained in this neat chart here on the screen is what I think about when I think of staff recruitment and selection in nonprofit organizations. This list is not limited, of course, and you all may have some other ideas about what should be posted here. Some of the things that we do when we do recruitment and selection are build a recruiting team within the nonprofit organization. This could be staff, volunteers, or a mix of both. We also write job descriptions, job advertisements. We source candidates and we attract applicants. Once we attract the applicants, we process their applications, we screen their applications, we conduct interviews as part of the recruitment process. We check references. Most of us would do that, and there may be some that don't, but it's definitely come out in the research that it's a great practice. When we're doing recruitment and selection, we end up extending an offer to an employee, more so as part of the selection process. We also, once the employee is hired, we manage their transition into the new workplace. So before recruitment can occur, it has to be determined that you are looking for an individual to be part of your team, and the position also needs to be defined. So you need two things. You need a vacancy established, and you need a defined position. Then recruitment can begin. So what I mean by that is you need to know what it is that needs to be done in the organization before you post an ad or start recruiting. Recruitment in the nonprofit sector is becoming increasingly competitive. It is becoming more challenging to recruit in nonprofit organizations. This certainly calls for creativity when recruiting. You will need to determine, as nonprofit organizations and teams, where you would ideally like to find an employee. For example, are you looking for recent graduates from colleges or universities with specific experience? Are you looking for people from other nonprofit organizations? And perhaps, are you looking for someone that already works for your organization with a volunteer capacity? So they may not work for money, but they do great work as a volunteer for your organization. So these are all questions we must ask ourselves when we're recruiting. We need to be innovative in our approach, and we need to target the right people for the job. Also keep in mind, this presentation tends to be geared towards paid staff, but quite often we are tasked with recruiting and selecting volunteer staff. So the same principles would apply across the board to treat them fairly, equitably, and at the end of the day, ensure they know their role within the organization. So when advertising for positions, financial resources may be limited. So we have some resources here on this slide that you can use to advertise for free for the most part. Now some ads you need to pay for example, Career Beacon, I know they do charge a fee. And depending on the audience you're trying to attract, that might be the best option for you, and you may have money in your budgets within the nonprofit sector to do so. So there's a lot of great resources. I'm going to bring you to Indeed right now. This is just a print screen of the Indeed website. So many of you may have already been on this website. If someone was looking for a nonprofit job in St. John's, Newfoundland, this is what they would do. They could click in nonprofit and all the options will come up. You might also, spell it out a different way, or community organization. You might put something different in there when searching for a job. But it's great because people or potential employees can search what they're looking for. If they are that, caring and compassionate type, which is quite common in the nonprofit sector, that's where they would be able to zone in on exactly what they're looking for in a job. So when it comes to recruiting effectively, you need to consider a number of factors. You need to consider the amount of time that you have to fill the position. You also need to think about the type of role that you're trying to fill and whether you need a large candidate pool or a smaller one. For example, a senior position may require a wide candidate pool, while a general role may require a small candidate pool. If you are looking to quickly fill a role and do not have much time for a proper recruitment process, you may not be able to obtain the desired pool size. That would be ideal. I guess what I mean by this is if you were faced with a situation where you had to act quickly, you may not be able to reach out to a broad audience. If, for example, a specialized role, if you need someone with accounting experience, a certain amount of years education, you may want a large pool so that you can pick out the cream of the crop from your candidate pool. Internal recruitment is always an option for nonprofits. It can be very challenging to retain qualified staff, but internal recruitment could be a great way to ensure that employees grow with the organization. Internal recruitment allows for people you already know who either work with the organization right now, volunteer with the organization, that want to make a change by either moving to a higher position in the organization or make a lateral move. For example, they could be a coordinator now and they may move to a role that's a coordinator, but a different type of coordinator. The only caution I have here is to keep it fair and consistent. If you recruit internally for some jobs, you should do it for all of your jobs. Some organizations may decide to always advertise privately internally before going externally, while others are required to advertise externally as part of funding requirements and regulations. So you may be limited in this regard, but when you have the opportunity, it is a great option to recruit internally. Just think, the main reason why recruiting internally would be great for a nonprofit organization is because you already have an idea about the employee's capabilities. And as well, it's going to be very rewarding for an employee to grow with an organization and be offered a new opportunity. It provides employees and volunteers with career development. Someone may volunteer here at Community Sector Council Newfoundland Labrador, and they may be an awesome option for a paid staff person should an opportunity come up. Definitely supports morale, retention, definitely reduces time, costs, and it makes people feel valued when they see a natural progression. I will caution you though, if you use internal recruitment in isolation, it will definitely limit your candidate pool. It also reduces the opportunity to increase diversity on your team. Quite often people like to bring new blood to an organization if they can. Sometimes you can have employees who are disgruntled if they are not selected for the new position. So do keep this in mind when you're managing conflict within your organization. So from the research, we've come up with some best practices for nonprofits when it comes to recruiting and selecting employees. It's very important to highlight your mission and make it very easy for individuals to apply for work within your organization. So what I mean by this is to ensure that you highlight your mission on your webpage, for example. A lot of nonprofit organizations have a webpage. They may also have a Facebook page. A great opportunity on social media to highlight your mission. You can also make it easy for individuals to apply by having clear requirements outlined on your webpage and in the job ad. You also want to keep in mind that you need to be realistic when offering a position to somebody. It's best to be realistic but competitive with regards to your compensation and benefits package. Whether this means being creative if the financial resources are not there and offering someone a little bit more vacation, or adding, a flexible work schedule perk to the package. That is a smart choice. It is said in the research that it's a great idea to focus on retaining the employees that you've come to know and love right from the beginning of their employment. In the interview, you could focus on retention by, ensuring that individuals know everything that is expected. If you're very clear throughout your interview process and your hiring process, employees will feel good about that and be likely to stay. We're going to move on now to selection in the nonprofit sector. The term selection refers to the process of choosing candidates for employment. The ultimate goal in selection is to ensure that employees are recruited and selected through an objective, consistent process that complies minimally with human rights legislation. This neat quote from a nonprofit source, Imagine Canada Sector Source, I thought was pretty neat, and it summed up everything that you would try to do when selecting an employee. You need to be fair, equitable, be familiar with legislation, and keep in mind it's okay to refer to this legislation on a regular basis. Don't feel like you need to know it all when you're selecting your employees, and don't feel like it's not a good idea to check it, even though you might already be going through the recruitment and selection process. So it is agreed that hiring decisions are challenging and they take time and energy. There's always an element of risk involved in recruiting and selecting an employee. You never really know if someone is who they say they are, or if they work the way they say they do, until they are actually in the role within your organization. It's absolutely impossible to be 100% certain of a candidate's performance in a role. The best way to proactively mitigate this risk is to have a process or toolkit in place. So this toolkit could be as simple or as complex as you would like. But when you have a set of practices that you use continuously, you're more likely to mitigate that risk. You ensure that you have a thorough process, and likely your hires will be that much better when you take the time to go through it at the beginning. My best advice for those in nonprofit organizations is to use the free resources available whenever possible. As I mentioned earlier, I have a handout here attached to the presentation that provides some great resources. If you think of any topic area within recruitment and selection, or anything else within HR for that matter, that you'd like added, please do not be afraid to reach out to me. Your organization may have some excellent processes in place already that others could benefit from, so please feel free to share, and I will be glad to distribute to the group. Quite often, privacy issues come up as well when you're dealing with human resources in general, and we can provide some great resources for that as well. So it's important for nonprofit organizations to develop criteria for selection. It does not need to be a complex process. A simple process works just as good. This is just a guideline for what you can do when developing criteria. When you actually develop criteria, it allows you to select the best person for the job. We will get into this shortly when we go to job descriptions. Selection criteria aids in screening resumes. It's a great way to measure candidates on their abilities and skills. The ultimate goal for everybody here is to select the best person for the job. So if you already have job descriptions in place, that's great. Selection criteria should come from the job description. That's why job descriptions are always the first step before implementing any recruitment and selection process. The neat thing about a job description is it can easily translate into the selection criteria, and you basically have the groundwork done. So I'm loving the images. It's something I always like to incorporate in the presentation, and it helps in understanding the material as well. So hopefully you're enjoying it as well. It's important to have clear and measurable selection criteria. You want to consider the knowledge, the skills, the qualifications, and experience that you're looking for. You also want to incorporate personal attributes that you're looking for. You want to ensure that someone is going to be a good fit to the culture. You want to be specific, measurable, and job related when selecting criteria. When you are developing selection criteria, you definitely need to pay attention to skills, qualification, and experience. You need to also see what types of things would be useful in assisting an individual to fit in with your workplace culture. The most important thing to keep in mind is to ensure that your criteria does not exclude prohibited grounds, people in certain groups that are prohibited under the human rights legislation. So that's key. So what I mean by this is, although a funny example, you can't discriminate. You can't say we are only looking for, fathers for this role, or we are only looking for pregnant women for this role. Obviously, that's a silly, silly example, but those criteria are prohibited under human rights legislation. We will look at that a little bit later, the grounds that are protected, but of course, you would not want to have something that excludes any group. So moving on to job descriptions, a lot of the work done during the recruitment and selection process stems from a good job description, as we mentioned. So it has benefits for the employee. For an employee, the job description outlines the duties and responsibilities. It should be clear about what is expected in the job. Most importantly, a job description allows an individual to know how their position would contribute to the mission, goals, and objectives of the organization. It helps them know why they are important, why they are hired, and why they're doing the job that they were selected for. Job descriptions also assist the organization itself. They help to ensure that there is organizational effectiveness. It helps to also ensure that workloads are aligned with the organization's overall mission and values. Job descriptions are also great for helping an organization clearly identify the most appropriate employee for new duties when realigning workloads. So once you have a new employee on board, you may decide that you're going to realign the workloads of your team. And what better thing to have but a job description to help you do this. So job descriptions are essentially the foundation for most HR management activities. For example, recruitment. Job descriptions are used to develop a recruitment campaign that clearly articulates the duties to be performed and the qualifications required by the organization for the position. With regards to selection, job descriptions aid in developing interview questions, hiring criteria, and they aid in the screening process by outlining the duties and qualifications required. The job description itself helps with orienting a new employee to a job. It helps them see how their position relates to other positions in the organization as well. It can also be used as a method of identifying training. It can be used to identify areas where the employee does not adequately meet the qualifications of the position, but can obtain training on. So for example, you may have a specific system that you use that you do training on for new employees, and you know, checking out a job description can help you identify this. You may even want to put down in your job ad that on-the-job training will be required once employee starts work. Job descriptions are great for compensation issues or problems. It can be used to develop a consistent salary structure, which is based on relative level of duties, responsibility, and qualifications for the position within the organization. The job description can be linked to performance management. So quite often you can develop a work plan and use your job description to monitor performance. And you know, this with legal defense, what we mean by that is, for example, if an employee is terminated for poor performance, a job description, when it is kept accurate and complete, will help the organization defend its decision to terminate the employee. Now, I know that's definitely a heavy topic, and our last webinar, as part of the 4-part series, will be on employee departure from organizations, which includes termination. So it'd be great if you could check that out as well. What if your organization does not have accurate job descriptions? Maybe they haven't been updated in a while, or maybe they do not exist. You would perform a job analysis here. The purpose of a job analysis is to provide necessary information to write the job description. It's basically the homework that is done before actually writing the job description. It allows for an opportunity to research what is actually done day to day in a role. So the types of information collected during a job analysis will be specific to each organization, but typically the types of information that is gathered includes a summary of duties, the details of the most common duties, whether or not someone has supervisory responsibilities, the educational requirements of the job, any special qualifications or experience. It may outline equipment and tools used. Quite often I've seen in the healthcare industry, they outline how much weight employees could end up lifting every day. So it could include, you know, when you do the job analysis and ask the employees what they do, you may find out that they lift a lot of heavy objects, and it does need to be outlined in the job description. You might outline frequency of supervision. You may put in there those that the individual will deal with on a day-to-day basis. You might also include their authority for decision making once you talk to the employees as you do the job analysis. And you know, it could be other things. You may learn more about working conditions, physical or mental demands of the job. So I'm thinking in my mind about, you know, like I know it's not a non-profit job, but like a neurosurgeon that may have huge mental demands that those hiring need to know about when they are developing a job description. So information about jobs can be gathered using qualitative or narrative techniques such as interviews, questionnaires, observations, and activity logs. So the employee and the manager for 2 different roles could be asked a series of questions about their job, how it relates to each other, essential tasks of the job, and the abilities required to perform it well. So you may choose to do questionnaires and get employees to fill out a standard questionnaire about the essential tasks of the job. So there's actually a HR toolkit available in one of the resources on a sample job analysis questionnaire. So I can easily point that out to you later if you need. You may decide to just observe what someone does in the run of a day. So take some time to ensure that you check out the essential tasks of the job. And you may just collect the activities an employee does and record them on a standardized form. I mean, easily observable would be great if people had the time. That's the only drawback with this one. You may not have the time to observe another employee. So that's why it's great to get them to do the activity log and keep a log of their activity, and then you can get together to discuss it and quite possibly do some job shadowing when time allows. This is the NLHR Manager website. It's a great resource. As you can see, they have some basic human resources templates. So I just wanted to alert you to this. I also have some here that I just did a print screen. You might want a job description template if you don't have any job descriptions in place, or if they are outdated and you want to update. You may want to look at this resource. Although these resources have been there for some time, they're still very relevant and useful in the nonprofit sector. Beware, some of the links you may not actually be able to click, because we all know, when funding is no longer there, sometimes resources have to come down. But for the most part, when I checked this website, everything was available. So, as briefly mentioned earlier, employee orientation is a big part of recruitment and selection. It can also be referred to as employee onboarding. This can also translate into retaining good employees, which we talked about earlier. If you provide all necessary information at the get-go, you will be more likely to retain your great employees. It's a way of introducing employees to their new role. It also helps them feel comfortable, and it orients them to the organization, the culture, the values, and even, the informal things that people don't necessarily talk about. Orienting an employee takes time. Quite often, workplaces, nonprofits, for-profits forego this essential piece of the HR puzzle. Sometimes employees are left to figure it out on their own. Not intentionally, but time does not always allow. I strongly recommend to have an orientation package in place, even if it's something as simple as a first day checklist or a buddy program. If you implement a buddy program by where you have an employee available at all times to answer the new employee's questions. You need to be creative in this to provide these options, because, as we said earlier, resources are not always available to provide an elaborate employee orientation. So this cute little picture of the zebra saying, "I think it's stress." We will avoid that when we have a good orientation. You will reduce the anxiety of an employee. I know that I don't have the mics open, but think of, when you started the job you're in now or a previous role, and the level of anxiety that you felt when you started because of the fact that you didn't know things, or you didn't know where to go to get certain documents, things like that. Think about how it could have all been avoided if you had a great orientation package in place. And maybe you did have a great orientation package. Maybe things went fabulous, and I can't wait for you to tell us all about that. So, not only does a good orientation package allow an employee to reduce their level of anxiety, it allows them to be socialized to the culture, to the values, the behaviors, and even the formal or informal practices. I want to touch base on non-standard employment in the Canadian nonprofit sector. And some of you may not have heard the term non-standard employment before, but, basically all this is non-standard work arrangements outside of the norm. So it can be part-time work, temporary work, fixed-term contracting, and subcontracting. So these are all very common in the nonprofit sector. Studies about non-standard employment in the nonprofit sector are not common, which made it a bit difficult for me to find resources for this and to see how overall trends play out regarding recruitment and selection. I do have two quotes here that are oldies but goodies, in my opinion. The first quote says that part-time and temporary work is more common in the nonprofit sector than the for-profit sector. So this makes sense. It also introduces some challenges with regards to recruitment and selection. So you may not, be able to get that employee that you're looking for because you can only offer part-time hours. Or you could be limited in getting the candidate that is ideal for your organization because of the nature of the work. It could be contract work. People could be looking for full-time employment, things like that. The second quote basically just says that contract work is growing throughout the sector. And I know 2003 and 2001 are old sources, but throughout the research, this is increasingly common. I want to touch briefly on interviews. So interviews, the great thing about interviews is that when you ask the right questions, interviews will confirm the candidate's education, training, and experience. It will provide info about the candidate's past performance and accomplishments. It will indicate the candidate's capability within the culture of the workplace. It may shine light on the work pace, the work style that they're used to, and it might offer insights into why they're opting for a job change. So for key question responses, you can take that opportunity to probe further and continue on a great conversation with the employee. So for example, if there's a common behavioral question that always comes up on the job, here at Community Sector Council, for example, when Darlene interviewed me, it'd be great to bring that in and probe me further on why I would deal with the situation the way I did. And it could really tell Darlene how well I would fit with the culture. Happy to report that it all worked out. Very glad to be here. So here are some questions that you would never, ever ask in an interview. I know they may be silly, but in some places this actually happens. You don't want to ask someone, if they plan on having children. You don't want to ask them what their religious practices are. You don't want to ask if they have any disabilities. Have they ever been arrested? Are you responsible for parental care? Do you have a senior parent that requires care and a lot of time out of the office? Those are things you would never, ever, ever ask. Those are protected grounds under human rights legislation. When we look at reference checking, as I mentioned earlier, it's a great practice to have. This is a sample reference check form here that can be obtained through the hrcouncil.ca. I found it quite helpful, and it's a timeless resource. It doesn't really get old. I attended a learning session recently in the nonprofit sector, and they're all about rip off and duplicate. That's a thing. And what it means is not reinvent the wheel, but use the resources out there and modify to what you need. So very different from a for-profit environment, but for the nonprofit environment, it's a great resource to rip off and duplicate, within reason and abiding by copyright law and all that, and respecting privacy as well. I also wanted to highlight another section of the hrcouncil.ca that is useful for nonprofit organizations. Some of these links may not be available, but most of them were when I checked. If you're looking to do a job evaluation, you might not know where to start. If you're looking for a policy on discipline, this is a great place to start. Even things as simple as a dress code. If you want to roll out a policy on dress code, this is a great resource for you. So this is included in the handouts as well. So earlier in the presentation, I referred to complying by the appropriate legislation when recruiting and selecting employees. This is a great resource. It's the employment standards legislation in Newfoundland and Labrador. This is also on your handout. And while I have the time to mention it, I will be sending an email with the links so that you can click them and you don't actually have to type out this entire HTTP address. So that'll be great. But if you want to go check out this PDF that's available online, I highly recommend it. Also appropriate to tell you that we will be hosting a labor standards session here at the Community Sector Council on May 26th in the morning. We will have more details soon on our website, and we will be opening registration very soon. We do plan on also doing a webinar for those that cannot make it in person. So lots of exciting things coming up, lots of great resources to be shared. And the presentation is free, of course. That's always a benefit. I mentioned earlier human rights legislation, so I just wanted to draw your attention to the Canadian Human Rights Act. This is also available on your handout, and it's a great resource to always review and to help you ensure that you're up to date on your policies and procedures and not, going against anything. As we said earlier, human rights legislation um, provides information on the protected grounds. So they would be religion, family status, disability, age, sex, marital status, national or ethnic origin, um, things like that. The race, conviction for an offense for which pardon has been granted, or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. So that's a lot of info there, but if you check out the human rights legislation, it should provide some more detail for you. Here we have the Canada Occupational Health and Safety Regulations online, also in your resources. A great thing to check out when you're looking at human resources in general and recruiting and retaining employees. You want to do things safely. So we are nearing the end of the actual presentation. We're doing really good on time. This is where we're going to open up the floor for some questions. You can type them in the question box. But we really want to hear from you about some topics that you'd like to hear more about. We want to hear from you. We want to get your opinion on whether there are things that you feel are overlooked when it comes to HR. We want to also know, do you find recruitment and selection challenging, or do you find it easy? We would love for you to speak up. So, as I mentioned, we will have a lot of great learning opportunities coming up. We'll have webinars. We're going to have a labor standards session in person and online. So those will help answer any questions you have about those specific areas. But I'll open the floor now, and I'm going to unmute Darlene so that she can chime in when anyone has a question. And we only have about 12 minutes left, so it'll be great to hear from some of you on what you thought about the presentation.
Hi,
All
Tina.
right.
Thanks.
You're so
The
welcome.
One of the things I'd like to point out is that you raised so many topics that we can do some additional sessions on. Like, I'm really looking forward to doing a session just on human rights legislation alone, because that
Yes.
is a huge issue in our sector. And I think often in our sector, when we don't have access, for example, to an HR specialist, we're sort of flailing around and we don't always know what to do. We don't know what's in the legislation. And in fact, all of that information is really easy to find and we can easily do a webinar on it. Occupational health and safety is another topic. And these are topics that we just grazed tonight, but we can dig into them if people are interested. Now
Absolutely.
on now on my screen, I only see one question, and I actually put it up there a while ago because I get asked this question quite often when people are trying to hire somebody in the sector. And they want
Okay.
to know, yeah, they want to know if there's a salary scale anywhere or some research on how much people are paid in the nonprofit sector. And sad to say, no, there isn't. And any research that's been done across the country often has so few numbers from Newfoundland and Labrador that they don't even report on them. So it's very, very difficult to get any kind of a good idea on what a scale might be to put somebody in place, i.e., for an executive director. So I always tell people to look for some existing scales that might be online, like teacher pay scales sometimes are online, social work pay scales sometimes are online, and they usually equate with how much education you've got and how many years you have been in the workforce. So if you can find somebody else's scale, then you can perhaps do, as you suggested earlier in the presentation, a job analysis to find out how to write up your job description. So that's kind of the best advice I can give there, because there is no scale for our sector, and maybe our labor market research will get some additional information. So the other thing that you raised around doing the job analysis, that also really interested me, because if we could do a session on how to do a job analysis um, and expand on those points that you summarized, it would be helpful to people, because we often just don't know what we're doing here. We get some project funding or we get some long-term funding, and we realize, wow, we've got to put somebody in place, and we don't even always know what to call them. Do we call them a project coordinator? Do we call them an executive director? Do we allow them to sit on board in at board meetings or not? So there's so many questions that, if we had a network and some labor market research, we might be able to get some answers for people, because it's very, very tough to answer these questions when people contact us. So I don't see any other questions there. Are there any on your screen, Tina?
Actually, I do. I see them now. I see a lot of questions.
Okay,
Oh
they're
no, and
not
I'm
showing up on
seeing
my
that
screen.
Sandra Budden mentioned that she couldn't hear me at all. Sandra, I hope that you heard me after. If not, this has all been recorded. Okay, and there was another comment. Darlene, would you mind speaking closer to the microphone, please? So
Okay.
hopefully the presentation was fairly clear. But if not, any questions anyone has, we would be glad to help. Um, there, Darlene covered the question about salary scale, um, so that was covered. There was a question from an individual who said, generally, how do you source candidates?
Okay, is that a wonder about advertising? Because generally that's what we do rely on in our sector, as widespread um, as widespread advertising as we can. I know everybody says work your networks, but that's really tough. It's very time consuming. I don't know if you have any other advice, Tina, but widespread advertising, and that's often required by funders too,
Right,
is generally the way people go, especially with the free advertising that's available to us now and social media.
absolutely. The only other thing I could add to that would be if you know what you're looking for, you may decide to be part of a free job fair or an event, or you may decide to get out in the community and, you know, get within those groups that you're looking to source, and spread, word of mouth outside of, job advertisements, paid or unpaid advertisements. Um, that could be an option. Actually, getting out, asking colleagues, friends if they know anyone that would be great for the role. Um, I find with this difficult economic time, no matter what you post, you tend to get a lot of job applications, and they may not even be relevant for what you're looking for. So I think this individual is asking how do you source the good candidates, the ones that you're looking to attract. So I hope we answered the question. I don't know if you have anything to add, Darlene.
I do actually. I was going to point out that in our sector, we are often with project funds, maybe from one or the other level of government. And uh, I think that increasingly we are seeing in contracts that we ourselves as organizations sign that we are required to do advertising. like they're asking you in your contract to make sure that you have a transparent and fair recruitment and selection process. So if you
Yes.
haven't read that in a contract, I'd be surprised because, in particular, from the federal government, we're seeing things like that. So there is an obligation to go out to the public, and that does cover you in that you can say, look, we advertised.
Right.
As much as we like to do networking in our sector, sometimes the requirement is to put an ad out there.
Excellent. Thanks, Darlene. And I apologize, everyone, for not seeing the questions earlier. I don't know why they didn't show up, but we have another individual suggesting that we may want to consider offering a separate training course on hiring students for the summer. So, Darlene, if you could make a note on that.
I will. That's an
Um,
excellent idea.
it's a really great idea.
Yeah.
And this individual said, would love to see this as many nonprofits hire students, which is a little different, and it absolutely is. So
Yes,
thank you.
and also, Tina, you sent me a link the other day to Workplace NL, and they actually have a webinar later in May. I think it's around the 24th or the 26th. People
Yeah,
might want to just check it out on how to hire youth. Now, I don't think it's about funding. I think it's about safe working conditions for young
right.
people, but it is a resource. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be getting up online sooner rather than later, so people can benefit from this. I mean, there's training around and it's free, and unless we tell people about it, we don't know about it. So I definitely know that that webinar is on the go because I actually signed up for it myself.
Excellent. Thanks, Darlene. And I can get the link to that and email it out when I send out the resources to you all
Oh, great
so that
idea.
you don't miss it.
Hmm.
We have a thank you, so thank you there. We also have a comment. What should a manager do when they find a person has been hired and they embellished on their resume? So much so that they cannot do the job requirements. That's a really great question. Basically, it's illegal to lie on your resume. So in this case, you would refer to, you know, you may have to refer to a lawyer if it's something serious. That can also be costly. But a manager, you know, if someone has falsified their resume, I believe that's a criminal offense.
Well, there's certainly grounds there for taking a person out of a position. One of the ways that you try to protect yourself against things like that is you put a probationary period in place, and we're starting to get requests for looking at legally what can you do in terms of putting an employee on probation, and then that gives you time to have a good look at the employee, find out whether they are competent or not. And the employer has the right to set the conditions of employment. So if a person can't do a job, um, I don't think it's all that difficult to remove somebody from the position, but you would want to check with Workplace NL about the conditions for dismissal, and that's another great topic area that we're looking into as well. Cause, just cause, probation. How do you remove an employee who's obviously not functioning properly?
Yes, excellent. I would like to add to that as well. If you want, well, when you're in a situation and you found that they, embellished their resume, you would have to take action and you would have just cause for doing so. If someone actually lied or they are incompetent and cannot do the job requirements, then you would have some room to do what you need to do there. If you want to prevent it for the future, I would suggest verifying anything that's on the resume in the first place. So this
Hmm.
may go as far as talking to the references briefly about the role they did and just asking the right questions at the right time. If Joe White um, says that he's very analytical and he managed a computer system and he didn't actually. Sometimes that could come out in a reference check. Also, you would want to check qualifications. So if someone has says they have a diploma or a degree, you would want to get a copy of that when they are applying.
You mean
When you're
ask
at
for the
that point,
transcript? Do you mean ask for the
yes,
transcript? Okay.
you
That
could
so
ask for their transcript.
it's okay to ask for a transcript when you're interviewing somebody.
I think so, as You're just restating what they are stating on their resume. They should be able to produce that document.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that could go very wrong if someone falsified their resume. That's a real HR nightmare. So you could look at preventative measures um, and reiterate even in the job process that everything you could reiterate where people apply that I've seen it on a lot of job ads where they say, uh, I agree that this information is true and correct, and my qualifications, everything is, real info. I see that on a lot of job advertisements or when people are actually submitting applications. So you could even do, if you have an email where everyone sends their resumes, you can do an automatic reply and state in that you verified your information and it is true and correct.
Okay, I didn't know you could do that. That's an interesting practice.
Yeah, it could be a neat way to do it. I know when, these elaborate systems online, when people are applying for jobs, there's an end check mark that you need to uh, check, and you're acknowledging the fact that you haven't lied in any of your application process.
Okay,
Yeah,
good practice.
good practice. So I think that is it for the questions. Is there anyone else that has any questions? It's 8:32, so I'm going to just give it a second. And if there are no questions, we will end the session. We really, really appreciate you all joining us this evening at this convenient time, we believe, to do a webinar because we know everyone's so busy in the day. If you have anything else that you think of um, after this session, if you sleep on it and you think of it tomorrow, we would love to hear from you. Please send me an email directly or give me a call. I'll be glad to help you there or send out some resources to you.
And thank you from me. So stay in touch with us at the Community Sector Council. It occurs to me that it would be a great idea to have a webinar where we asked an expert, or maybe even if we asked people what their questions were in advance, and then we could do a webinar and try to answer all the questions. That would be kind of fun, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. I just seen some more comments. I'm going to quickly go through them. Someone commented that the training by Workplace NL on hiring students is offered on a weekday in the morning, not ideal for nonprofits. So perhaps we could do something with that, and we can, get some resources together and put off our own session on hiring students.
Great
So
idea.
thank you for that comment. Another individual has said that the sound has not been reliable during the session, so it's come and gone. Just a note for the next session. So that's quite unfortunate. Really sorry about that. We will be having a recording online, so hopefully when I test that recording, it all comes up, and I apologize for that. If you do need anything further, please let me know. And it looks like that is it. There was a comment. Great job. Thank you very much for your comment. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you all at some of the other webinars and in-person sessions. We are
Okay.
signing off now. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.